Thank you very much. I shall begin. Everybody's rightly focused on the fact that we have a problem with reading scores, and they've been anchored where they are for quite some time, with an incredibly high percentage of children not reading at grade level. And the old kind of truism that kids learn to read by grade 3 or 4 and they read to learn thereafter. But they're not learning to read by grade 3 or 4. So that said, dyslexia, according to NIH kind of reviewed literature, affects 20% of our population. Those 20% learn to read differently, and if their differences are not acknowledged, then they will be among those, almost an anchor holding reading scores down. Now, it would just intuitively make sense to diagnose the child with dyslexia as early as possible. Most states do not screen. That said, you can see where I'm going with my own thoughts. But what would be your approach to addressing the issue of dyslexia, which is frankly ignored, not in a state like New Hampshire, where Governor Hassan actually put in such programs, but in other states? What would be your approach to make sure that the child who's dyslexic is diagnosed at an early stage and receives the intervention that she or he would need to receive?
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Cassidy, and I know this is a very sensitive subject for you, since I believe it is your son that does have dyslexia, as you and I discussed when I visited with you in your office.
My daughter, but that's
I'm sorry, it's your daughter. But I certainly very much would like to be sure that we are looking to diagnose issues like dyslexia early, because we have found that it can be turned around. So I'd like to work with you and understand how we could have better approach for that in our school systems.
You had mentioned that you would not tolerate the anti-Semitism that has been on the rise. What steps would you take to make sure the backlog of anti-Semitism cases at the Office of Civil Rights is processed and those responsible for illegal discrimination held accountable?
Senator Kennedy, Cassidy, I think that by far what we saw happening on our campuses was absolutely deplorable. Kids locked in libraries, afraid to come out. Now, I believe in freedom of speech on campus, open debate, and we should encourage that. But we cannot allow violence happening on our campuses. That puts all students in an unsafe place. And if I were confirmed as the Secretary of Education, I would want to make sure that the presidents of those universities and those colleges are taking very strong measures not to allow those to happen. They can call in the police, they can do whatever they need to do, set standards, and to make sure those standards are upheld. We cannot allow that kind of violence to take place on our college campuses.
Now, there's a current backlog in the Office of Civil Rights within the Dartmouth Department of Education to address this. Do you have any specific plans about how you could help them address that backlog?
Well, I'd like very much to be confirmed and to be able to get into the department and understand that backlog, to talk to those lawyers who were there, and let's focus on what we need to do to clear out that backlog. And I'd look forward to doing that.
President Trump is reportedly drafting an executive order requiring the Secretary of Education to develop a plan for downsizing the Department of Education and working with Congress to eliminate entirely. Yes or no? Do you agree that since the department was created by Congress, it would need an act of Congress to actually close the Department of Education?
And certainly President Trump understands that we'll be working with Congress. We'd like to do this right. We'd like to make sure that we are presenting a plan that I think our senators could get on board with and our Congress could get on board with, that would have a better functioning Department of Education, but certainly does require congressional action.
Okay. In terms of the plans to downsize, what would be the components of that plan that would not require congressional approval?
Well, I do believe, Senator, that there are departments of education that are established by statute, and those particular departments we'd have to pay particular attention to. But long before there was a Department of Education, we fulfilled the programs of our educational system. Are there other areas, other agencies where parts of the Department of Education could better serve our students and our parents on the local level? And I am really all for the President's mission, which is to return education to the states. I believe, as he does, that the best education is closest to the child and not certainly from Washington, D.C.
If the department is downsized, would the states and localities still receive the federal funding which they currently receive?
Yes.
Okay. With
It
that,
is not the president's goal to defund the programs. It is only to have it operate more efficiently.
With that, I yield to Senator Sanders.